I just have a lot of chaotic energy right now, so this is still happening. This is my room. Look how many stacks of books I have. It's really nice. I read, like, one post years ago of someone being like, in my new house, we ran out of space on the bookshelves or whatever. So I just have these stacks of books everywhere from where they ended up. And I, like, read this, and they were talking about how frustrating it was. But I'm like, this is my dream. Like, that's the goal aesthetic for a house, is to have to have stacks of books everywhere, but also have full bookshelves. So it's not like you're being ridiculous and just, like, don't know how to keep things, but, like, you just don't have the space. You have so many books. That was my dream as a child. And I realized at some point during the quarantine that I was, like, living the dream, because I've got, like, first of all, this is the bookshelf that carries books, so don't judge for this. That's in the other room. But, like, I've got the bookshelf with books and stuff, and then we got a stack of books. And then we got over here on the dresser, stack of books. Most of these are actually dust jackets, but oh well. Then we go over here further on the dresser, stack of books and stack of books. Then we go to the table by the window, stack of books. Then we go over to the windowsill, stack of books, plus a couple books on the piano, plus lots of books actually in the bed, plus the bedside table stack, which is getting precarious and will have to change soon. And I'm really happy with where my life is right now. I'm thrilled about it. It's great. So that's nice. Yeah. I've got these nice cards that I'm making into, like, it's for every book I've read this year. So, like, we're going to sit down and look at these, because what else are we going to do? And it's like, clearly I read the Percy Jackson series this year. So you go through each of those, but they're all based on the books I read this year, so that later when I play cards, I get to look back at all the books I've read. The last book I did shuffled, but this one I'm doing in order, so it's, like, based on when I read it. This is Red, White, and Royal Blue. This is so good. If you haven't read this, sorry, that was really aggressively towards the camera, but if you haven't read this book, I'd highly recommend it. It's by Casey McQuiston. It's, it's like the son, so first son of the United States, so the son of the first woman president falls in love without really knowing that's what he's doing, because he's kind of dumb, and it's upsetting because I relate, like, he goes through this whole process of figuring out he's bisexual and also figuring out that he's into this guy. And he's so stupid the whole time. Like, he's sitting there and he's talking about the guy and he's like, oh my gosh, he's, like, so annoyingly attractive. Like, I see his face and, like, his perfect chiseled jaw and his soft lips and his, like, tousled hair. And there's something in my stomach that, like, is, like, fluttering. It must be anger. I must want to punch him. And it's like, you're so dumb. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna punch you. What are you doing? Obviously you like him. And then later on, he's figuring out that he's bi, and it takes so much for him to figure it out. And I'm reading through it, and the first time I read it, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so dumb. This is ridiculous. And I read it through a second time, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really, like, get it together, Alex. But then the third time I was reading it, so I was reading it to a friend, right? I had, like, started reading it to them. In that I was just, like, reading them some scene. It's during the quarantine, so we're on the phone. And I'm reading them some scene, and I was like, oh, this is so cute. You just have to hear it. So I'm just trying to read a paragraph. But then I'm like, oh, it keeps being cute if you want me to keep reading. And I was like, yeah, that's the friend. And so they were like, yeah, definitely, you should keep reading. So I was like, okay. So I keep reading, and I keep reading, and it's, like, 3 hours later, and we're like, okay, we have to go to bed. And I was like, but I kind of want to keep reading. I'm like, okay, tomorrow we'll just start from the beginning. And I ended up reading them the entire book, just over the phone, audiobook style. Which, by the way, the progress, I feel so bad that they had to listen to my British accent when we started this, because it was terrible. And now it's almost an alright accent. That was not a good example, I don't think. But I can kind of a little bit do a British accent now, and I'm pumped about it. I had to learn how to pronounce some different Welsh words that would disappoint all people who could actually speak Welsh. But anyone who doesn't speak Welsh thinks it sounds really badass, so that's cool. But anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so the third time I was reading it, when I was reading it to them, there was a lot of moments that were like when you're reading on your own, you don't always have the same realization, I don't know what words I'm saying, as when you're talking to somebody else, right? Like, it's like that scene in a sitcom where you, like, go to give someone advice, and then you're, like, realizing, oh, that advice applies very specifically to the situation I am currently in. I should take that advice, and you don't notice it until you say it out loud to someone else. So I'm reading this book, and I'm just talking so much about how stupid this boy is for taking so long to figure it out, and how obvious it is. And I'm realizing the whole time of how when I was figuring out I was bisexual a couple years ago, how many things, like, there's so many, like, girls that after I figured out I was bisexual, I was like, oh my gosh, I had a crush on them. Obviously. And I, like, didn't even notice. I had no idea. Like, there's this one girl she was, like, my best friend for years. And I remember very specifically one night when I was sleeping over at her house, and I, like, sat there and went through the thought process of, like, do I have a crush on her? And I was like, but no, because this one guy I dated a while ago, I definitely liked him. So I can't be gay. So I probably don't have a crush on her. We're probably just, like, it's just friend feelings. I was a very dumb child. I wasn't that dumb, but, like, oh my gosh. Like, I knew bisexuality existed, and yet apparently it never registered in my brain. And, like, I never even, like, considered that would be a possibility for me, despite the fact that I got to the point, sorry, I talk really fast when I'm on a roll. This is how it is now. But I was, at one point, like, I got onto, I had been using Tumblr for a while, and I got really into learning things about the LGBTQ plus community. Like, so much. Like, I did my senior project. I didn't complete it. I didn't graduate because of it. It was a whole deal. But anyway, I attempted a senior project literally on different, like, research in the queer community. And, like, I learned all about, like, different sexualities and all sorts of different things. And I was educating other people. And, like, I have, like, 3 different friends who are all on the ace spectrum, who didn't even know it was a thing before, and, like, who had, like, maybe related with some ace things, but not all of it. And I was like, oh, it sounds like you could be lithromantic, or, like, it sounds like you could be demisexual. And they were like, oh my gosh, that is me. Like, this was my thing. Like, I got so educated on so many different identities, and yet somehow never considered that I personally could maybe be bisexual. Like, I never thought about it, literally until another friend came out to me as bi. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's chill. And I was like, that's a thing. Like, I knew that was a thing, but that's a thing. And so I had to, like, think about that. And then I went through this really, like, awkward time of, like, I had a friend who I wasn't sure if I had feelings for, and I was like, it'd be so nice. I have a whole Tumblr entry about it. Oh my gosh, it was very intense and long. I read it recently. It was kind of funny. But it was like, oh, well, it'd be really nice if I could just, like, have feelings for them, because then immediately I would know I'm bi. Because, like, now I've had feelings for guys and girls, and, like, automatically, because, like, at the time I knew about other genders, but I didn't know anyone of a non-binary gender. So, like, that's what I was going off of. But I was like, okay, cool. So, like, if I like her, then I know I'm bi because I've had attraction to more than one gender. Boom, we're set. But if I don't like her, then I'll never know if it's because I just happen to not like her, or if it's because I'm straight. And then later on I was like, but what if I never fall for a girl, but I am bi, but just happen to not fall for a girl just by chance? I just haven't run into one that I like. And so I was like, what? And so I'm, like, thinking, like, that was a whole thing for a long time. But, so I've had so many situations where very specific, like, it's pretty obvious you're not straight, Sky, you know? Like, if you're sitting here debating whether or not, like, well, what if I never know? And so I'll never know if I'm straight or bi because I just happen to not have fallen for a girl. Like, the amount of time I spent thinking about that definitely tells me I'm not straight, and the amount of different people who I've very specifically considered, do I have a crush on them? And then decided no because I forgot bisexuality was a possibility, is like, I just related really hard to Alex taking so long to figure this out. And I'm just like, I'm spending so much time talking about how much of an idiot he is because, oh my gosh, it's so obvious. And then I think back on my own life and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm that idiot. Ah! So that's a really overwhelming experience to go through. So that was tough. And it's great too because he's also been, like, thinking the same, like, he went through the same process with deciding to go to, well, I don't want to say this part because it's kind of spoilery, but he was, like, going, I don't want to talk about it. No. So he was going through the same process, deciding what he wanted to do career-wise, of, like, kept being like, well, maybe, but no, I'm not going to think about it, but maybe, but no, because that doesn't make any sense. And then like he's just going through that process a lot, and he talks about it with other people, and they're like, yes, obviously this is the best choice for you. And there's a lot of discussion about it. And so I personally have gone through a very similar process with like the same career, which is why I'm also not saying it, but I've been like, ooh, do I maybe want to do that? Am I kind of interested in that? And I'm like, but no, because I've always wanted to do this thing, like my whole life. And then I'm like, but maybe. And it's like, but no. And now I'm kind of finally at the point where I'm like, oh shit. Oh no, we're good. I just bumped into some water for painting. And so I'm like finally at the point where I'm like, oh, this actually makes sense. This is something I really want to do. And it's like, can't believe that took me so long. And then I realized like, wow, I can't believe I just pulled a freaking Alex Claremont again. Alex Claremont Diaz is frustratingly similar to me, and it's like I adore him with my whole heart, but with how often I sit there talking about how dumb he is, it's really frustrating to know that like he's me, I'm him. I hate it, but I love it. It's emotional. Anyway, I was talking about Red, White, and Royal Blue. Very good book. Yeah, so it's the first son of the United States, of the first woman president, falls in love with the Prince of Wales, who's like a Prince of England. Yeah. And it's everything that results from that. And it's so good, and it's like such an amazing book. I've got it right here. Wait. Boom. Heavily recommend if you want someone to audiobook read it to you. I got you. I really enjoy it. You will have to deal with a really bad accents, but it's fun. And if you want fun commentary, I can do that too. But if you don't, I cannot. But yeah, it's really good. Would recommend. Casey McQuiston, the author, is like so sweet. I've been watching all of their videos on Instagram Live lately and some interview they did this morning. And like, they're just such a genuine and sweet person, and I adore them. Oh my gosh. But yeah, so they're really cool, and they're writing another book right now that's got time travel and like sapphic romance, and I'm just so excited for it to come out, but it's gonna be so long. Anyway, we're